Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History.
All right, everybody, welcome to This Week in Wrestling History. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Jacob.
And we're here with another episode this week. Before we get into that,
Episode 9, woo!
episode 9, yeah. All right, almost up to episode 10.
We're almost double digits.
Woo! We're almost a professional podcast.
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay, well, that might be a little bit much.
We're close.
We're almost real boys as far as podcasting goes, I suppose. Shoot me for saying so much.
I'll try to.
I did that a ton last week. I apologize to everyone for that. I'm going to try a lot better about that this week.
Yeah, and I'm going to try to not just stop talking and try to keep everything flowing.
All right, we'll see how that goes.
Already. Come on, man.
This is awful. So, anything going on this week in wrestling that we can think of?
Not that I remember.
Let's say
Super Showdown is coming up?
Yeah, Super Showdown will be coming up basically right after we release this episode.
Is that this coming Saturday?
This coming Saturday, it'll be Friday night, technically Saturday morning for everyone in the U.S.
5 a.m. on the WWE Network on Saturday.
Yeah, 5 a.m. I'm sure I'm going to set my alarm to get up and listen to that.
Probably not. Probably not.
Yeah, so everything's kind of on hold until that drops. Nothing else major has been going on that I can think of.
No, I mean, the biggest thing was probably the AJ Styles Samoa Joe angles that have been happening.
Yeah,
have you seen any of that?
No, I haven't been keeping up with that. That's just kind of business as usual.
It's super creepy, Samoa Joe.
That's fun. It's nice that there's a different character rather than, hey, I'm the big tough guy.
Right.
So that's nice. Mixed Match Challenge has actually been sounding like it's been really fun again this year.
I like it a lot because they have so much fun with it because it's on Facebook. It's not like live TV or anything. They don't have scripts.
Yeah, it's just a little bit more free for everyone, and it sounds like it's really fun. I saw a couple highlights from this week's with Ruskishi, I guess we'll be calling it.
I wouldn't go that far, but
it was pretty entertaining. The quick clip I saw of it.
Yeah.
So.
And the Alicia Fox doing her best, what's his face, Jinder Mahal with the Shanti trying to like calm down.
So I'm so far out of WWE stuff right now that I don't even know what Jinder's gimmick. Right, I know it's kind of like the meditation coach, Serenity guy. It's still a heel gimmick, right?
Yes, and he's trying to get Alicia Fox to calm down and Shanti, as he keeps saying over and over again.
How is that a heel gimmick?
Because he gets in people's face, and I don't know.
Okay, it's a heel gimmick because they say it's a heel gimmick. Okay.
Alicia Fox saying Shanti over and over again in the most random spots where it makes zero sense has me cracking up every time I see it.
All right, well, good for her. It's nice to see, it's nice that the Mixed Match Challenge is a spot for performers that don't normally get a lot of screen time to kind of play around, play with their character a bit, and entertain people.
Some of them. I mean, you have like Braun Strowman and Ember Moon.
Well, right, yes, you do have some of the top names, but you need some of the top names in order to get people to watch this thing.
Right, and it's also something for someone like Bayley to do while she's waiting for Sasha to come back.
Sure.
And something for Finn Balor to do because he's underutilized.
Yeah.
Anywho,
editorializing aside. So this week we have something neat coming up this week. So last week we did In Your House 10 Mind Games from 1996.
Yep.
Now we actually have In Your House 18 from 1997, Bad Blood.
Yeah, this one was kind of interesting because there wasn't a whole lot on the undercard. It was all the major thing was the main event.
Right. The main event was the major thing, and we'll get to that. We're not going to quite spoil it yet. It's just, this is really interesting to kind of compare where the company has gone in the span of a year, in a pretty important year for the company, I would say.
Yeah, this was kind of, I would say, the start of the Attitude Era.
So a lot of people actually peg this event as the official start of the Attitude Era.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, they're gonna lose the big blue and yellow WWF logo soon and get us to the scratch
scratchy
logo.
Yep.
Yeah.
So All right. Well, then I guess without any further ado, and since we have a giant dog attacking us in the studio, it's time to get on to the main event.
Studio. You mean the upstairs of my house?
Hey, it's a studio.
Close enough.
All right, we'll be right back.
October 5th, 1997.
All right, so In Your House number 18, Bad Blood from October 5th, 1997.
Bad Blood with 2 Ds.
Yes. Again, how you know you're in the Attitude Era, everything is spelled wrong.
Oh, boy.
So, as we were saying, really a weird card because the undercard is really bad to forgettable in places.
I mean, the only two major things I would say that happened are it's one of our earlier looks at The Rock before he becomes The Rock.
Right, so we have Rocky Maivia freshly kind of joined into the Nation of Domination.
So he's fresh heel. Still, people are still booing him. He hasn't actually done the whole The Rock thing yet.
Yeah, he is not yet The Rock. He still has yet to transform into that. They may actually be the ums again. Sorry, they may actually be calling him The Rock, but it's predominantly Rocky Maivia at this point.
Yeah, he's gotten to the point now where he's lost all the shiny colors and the ribbons and
Right, he's no longer wearing the really ridiculous gimmick that he was wearing originally. The hair is a little bit more normal now. It's not those weird dreadlocky things.
yeah, he hasn't done the people's elbow the people's eyebrow just yet.
Right, we're not onto the people's eyebrow yet.
I mean, aside from that, the only other thing would be Owen Hart winning the Intercontinental belt.
Right, Owen Hart wins the IC belt. There's a lot to go on with Steve Austin in the Steve Austin as we all knew him from that era going on here. Before we actually get into that, what I think we should start by mentioning, the reason the undercard got really screwy here, this was unfortunately the day Brian Pillman died.
Yeah, they announced that as the show was kind of starting, that they had found him dead in his hotel room.
Right, so one of the more honestly tragic wrestling deaths where there's sadly been a number of them. This one kind of more earnest than the rest of them because this was legitimately just heart failure. It was a genetic condition. No drugs were suspected to be involved as far as things go.
Yeah, Vince McMahon brings that up at one point that we'd have to wait for the toxicology and all of that, but he says that they were like quote unquote testing for those things, and he said as he knew Brian Pillman was clean.
Right,
So,
yeah. Even to this day, as far as everything goes that I can tell, it was legitimately just congenital heart defect.
Yeah.
And heart condition killed him. And it's super, super unfortunate.
And they only learned about it just a couple of hours before the show started.
Right, so the wrestlers had been gathering at the arena, and no one knew where Brian was, and I believe it was actually Stone Cold, his former tag partner from WCW, that they had tasked, hey, find out where Pillman is.
Go find him.
Austin ends up calling the motel he was staying at, and the desk clerk basically informs him, oh, we found him dead hours ago and called the medical examiner about it.
Nobody, I mean, obviously WWE isn't the first people that you're going to call for somebody who's a relatively bigger guy who kind of looks like a wrestler. You wouldn't necessarily call them first.
Right, nor would one necessarily know how to get a hold of anyone in the office type thing.
Right.
Especially on a Sunday.
Yeah. So it's heartbreaking. And I mean, the reason that the card kind of gets screwy is you can tell at some points that people weren't 100% into it.
Right. So first off, he had a match with Dude Love scheduled for the card. So instantly that gets scrapped. Secondly, Brian Pillman was very close to the Hart family.
And they had a major part in 2 matches.
Right.
Well,
so there was an Owen versus Farouk for the IC belt. There was a tournament to figure out who was going to be the IC champ. So Owen definitely seemed pretty off his game. And then there was a Bret Hart, Davey Boy Smith versus Vader and the Patriot match, which had its own complications, which I'm sure we'll touch on real quick in a little bit. But again, those two had to definitely be reeling from, hey, close family friend has passed away. Don't really know anything more about it, but he's gone.
Now go do your show.
Get to work.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if there's any family in wrestling that's going to do that, it's probably going to be the Von Erichs, sadly, first off.
Right.
Followed closely by the Harts.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you can see it on Owen's face when he comes out that his promo is a little lackluster. His head isn't in it,
Right.
which you can't
completely
blame him.
understandably.
Yeah, you can't blame him at all for something like that.
Right. If I found out a close friend of mine died and then I was told to get to work and someone called me up with a tech problem, we work in tech support for those so curious about our day jobs.
Right.
If someone called me up, I'd be like, yeah, sure. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's just
So-
not going to be feeling it that day.
Yeah. I again can't blame any of them or any of the other wrestlers who were close to him, but you could definitely tell there was an aura about the fans. I don't think knew in the arena knew about it.
Right. I can't fathom they would have known about it. So as far as effects on the card, besides kind of bringing everyone down a bit, it caused that one match to be removed from the card, and they added 2 more in its place. We're not going to review these matches other than right now. The first match that was added was the Disciples of Apocalypse versus Los Boricuas.
Awful.
Just a bad match.
We actually talked about they had a match on one of our prior episodes that we looked at. It was the remember the gang warfare match
Yeah.
where Nation came out and ended up breaking everything up.
Yeah.
Still not good.
Nope.
This is another big match with all of them in it, and it still wasn't good.
No, the Nation was by far the most formed stable of the 3 gangs involved in the gang warfare era.
Well, they also had the most high-profile people in it too.
Well, exactly.
"Quote-unquote" high-profile.
Right. I mean, as high profile as D'Lo Brown and the Godfather can really be.
Right.
But these guys were still more fully formed characters than Skull and Crush and 8 Ball and who was the Chains?
Chains, yeah, with a Z.
Chains with a Z.
90s.
Because late 90s, right? And Los Boricuas, who were, I can name 2.
I can
think.
name one.
It was Savio Vega,
Yep, there goes mine.
Jose Estrada,
Nope.
and 2 other guys.
Yeah, no.
I'm-
Still not good.
So the only other thing I can name about Los Boricuas, one of them got their neck broke by Edge in his debut match.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I-
literally.
yeah.
I have nothing more on the subject than that.
So the other match was just one of the worst things I've ever seen. It was would we call them a minis match because that's what they were called back then?
Yeah, we'll call them minis.
So they were all luchadors, but they were all little people.
Yes.
And it was quite possibly the worst thing I have ever seen.
It was so bad. So first of all, the minis they're little people. I hope that is the proper term for them. I do not know, but hopefully we'll just say minis from now on.
Yeah.
So the minis are very much just almost sideshowy in their attraction to begin with, which is a little cringy.
Yeah.
They were not good as far as performers go. They were not crisp.
No, it was very sloppy.
If you see a lot of AAA wrestling out of Mexico, unfortunately, this is kind of par for the course from what I've seen of it.
Yeah, Mexican.
It's
I should say AAA Mexican wrestling, which is the major promotion down there.
AAA and CMLL.
They're sloppy.
Their approach is kind of the shotgun approach of we're going to throw a lot against the wall very quickly, and some of it may look really cool and awesome, and that's the stuff people are going to remember, and the stuff that doesn't look so good, people are just going to kind of forget
Yeah.
with all of the stuff that we throw at them. This match was really bad.
Yeah, it wasn't good. The only redeeming factor to anything in this match was the interactions between JR, Vince McMahon, and the King on commentary.
Yeah, King on commentary saved this entire thing.
The fact that he was laughing at how bad they were made it better.
Very much so. So the main mini that they were trying to push was Max Mini.
Yeah.
And looking this up, they tried to make this guy something for all of 3 weeks at most.
This was, I think we had talked about this, the first time that Vince McMahon pulling the plug on a division was the right idea.
Right. So I firmly believe the point of the minis was to try to counter WCW's cruiserweights. At this point in time, Raw was getting beaten pretty handedly for a long time by WCW because we're smack dab in the middle of the NWO.
Yeah, and this was that big stretch where
That like 82 weeks, I think it was.
Yeah.
Or however many weeks.
just whatever Bischoff's title for his podcast is.
Right. So we're smack dab in the middle of that. The cruiserweights were getting a lot of credit for being that opening hour. Vince has tried doing cruiserweights, lightweights, 205, junior heavyweights, whatever title you wanted to put on them. He had tried it before.
Mm-hmm.
He always does it very poorly. But this, I think, was their attempt at putting some sort of high energy, fast paced division together. And right off the bat, the writing on the wall was that this was a terrible idea. We should cut our losses, and they did, and it was the best for everyone involved.
I think the reason that it was cut so quickly was because back then Vince McMahon is literally sitting next to the ring watching this stuff.
So, fun fact about that, this would be the last time that ever happens.
Really?
This was the last pay-per-view event
Where
Vince
was the
ever
three
did
of
as a
them?
commentator.
Huh.
So, something that we'll definitely get to in the near future. The next pay-per-view after this was Survivor Series 1999 in Montreal, more commonly known as the Montreal Screwjob.
Yeah.
And because of everything that was kind of going on surrounding that event, Vince needing to be more of a role in his real capacity rather than his on-screen capacity, he was not a commentator anymore. And definitely after that night, things changed forever.
Well, and it was also one of those where he kind of stepped into that position of the authority figure against Stone Cold. And you could see that kind of starting during this pay-per-view.
Right. And that actually had been built up for weeks. So good transition here.
Mm-hmm.
The Stone Cold versus Owen thing. So going back to SummerSlam of this year, the previous pay-per-view to this, I believe, that's where Stone Cold won the title from Owen, but it's also where he got his neck broke.
Yep, and this shortly after when Stone Cold comes back where he's quote-unquote not cleared to wrestle.
Right.
Owen is doing the Owen 316, I just broke your neck.
Right. And this was the summer where Stone Cold was going around stunning Slaughter, stunning JR, stunning Vince, and really getting that anti-authority thing going because he had a broken neck and because he couldn't wrestle.
Right. He hasn't gotten to the point where he's catching the beers flying out of the air just yet.
Right. We're not quite fully super face of the company Stone Cold yet, but we're definitely building to that.
Mm-hmm.
And oddly enough, that was kind of helped by the broken neck that he was forced to do things like this and forced into this role.
And kind of pushed out of the title picture, any title picture for that matter, and literally was playing the foil of whoever he kind of picked on the card.
Right. So he gets involved in the Owen Hart Farouk finals of the IC title tournament for that belt that he lost.
Yep. Cracks Farouk over the head with the belt.
Right. Cracks Farouk because, as we would come to find out later on, his reasoning for that being, I'm taking this belt back from Owen. So in the meantime, he's getting this belt and keeping it, and I will make damn sure, which everyone loved because now Owen is scared crapless because he's got a Stone Cold Guardian Angel against his own wishes.
Yeah. Which was the story that kind of came out of this and played out for a while was relatively fun.
Right. So that was one of the big things to come out of this was Stone Cold being his anti-authority thing. Other big things to come out of the undercard here.
The only other thing I can think of is that tag match with Vader and the Patriot against...
Right. Brett was firmly in the New Heart Foundation, Anti-America, which really interesting the gimmick that had him firmly as a heel on TV and predominantly in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
and a face everywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of get. I would get it if they played that card now. I guess I wasn't really too politically aware in '97 because I was 6 years old.
That's fair.
So I could understand where they would kind of get that going now.
I'm pretty sure you could do that angle much easier in this day and age.
Oh yeah,
I'm pretty sure it'd be real easy for someone to support the U.S. blindly and get booed everywhere else in the world except cheered in the U.S. or vice versa pretty easily.
yeah. If they ran more shows outside of the U.S., I could see them using like Bobby Roode to kind of keep his glorious gimmick, but just shit on the United States everywhere he goes.
Yeah, and that would definitely get him. The problem is, depending on what part of the country you go in, that could get you cheered or booed very easily, too.
That's true. So other than that on the undercard, there really wasn't much else.
There was a tag title change.
Woo, the Godwins over the
Headbangers?
Yeah, big deal.
Yeah. About our only real takeaway there is the fall is a good time for the Godwins, as we covered last week.
Yeah, they usually end up getting something done around this time period.
Yeah, fall is the time to put the tag belts on the Godwins, apparently. Soon
and-
after, Mark Canterbury is his name, Henry O'Godwin, would get his neck broken by the Legion of Doom, unfortunately.
And wasn't it just before this that the other one broke his neck? Because somebody during commentary makes a kind of quip to that and is like, I think it's JR or the King goes,
Oh, this may have been right after his neck then.
something happens and King goes, why is everybody trying to break the Godwins' necks?
Right. So this is actually after he got his neck broke by Legion of Doom. Could have been at SummerSlam. That doesn't put you. It takes you more than a month to recover from a broken neck.
Yeah, it must have been a little bit
Mania
earlier.
or
Yeah.
earlier. Must have been much earlier in the year where they came back, got the belts, yada yada yada.
So then we move on to the main event of the card.
Right. Main event was the first ever Hell in the Cell.
Not a cell, the cell.
Right. So back when it was first introduced, it was Hell in the Cell.
And what's funny is they didn't show the cell like they usually do now, where throughout the card they'll cut a little promo and they'll pan the cameras up and show the cell hovering there.
Right. No one really knew what this thing was going to be until it descended upon the ring in the main event, and this thing got started.
Because if you watch some of the pay-per-view, like that thing was way up there.
Oh, yeah. They had that thing hiked to the ceiling.
It was so high that I don't even think the people in the arena, unless you were kind of paying attention, like looked up and were like, oh, I wonder what that is. They couldn't have seen it because it was so high up. It was past the light rigs that was up there.
Right, yeah. Normally it hangs about even with the lighting rig that's above the ring. This thing was just, it was up there.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So
This-
first one with
First
Shawn.
one ever, Shawn versus Taker.
Yep.
This was literally so close to being D-Generation X, but it wasn't yet.
Nope, not yet. It was definitely the precursor forming.
So literally the next night on Raw is when Bret Hart would refer to them as degenerates, and the week after that is when it would officially become D-Generation X.
Yeah, and they were actually starting to do the like crotch chops and everything like that during this pay-per-view.
Yeah, it was so proto DX,
Yeah.
I'll call it, right before everything. So we got Rude and Hunter and China all coming out with HBK, but getting sent back before the whole match can officially start.
Yep. Taker comes out because this is long after his thing with Paul Bearer.
Right, Paul Bearer is long gone. They had a feud that Taker settled it by throwing a fireball in Paul Bearer's face.
Because of the 90s.
Because, well, that would lead into
80s.
their gimmick of... So Paul Bearer is like, oh, you want to play with fire? Like you played with fire when you were a kid, when you burned down your parents' funeral home? Because I guess We're going real dark with this. We're going real deep with this gimmick.
Undertaker funeral home makes sense.
Sure. You're an Undertaker because your family owned a funeral home when you were a kid. All right, I guess you're not a zombie anymore.
Yeah, makes sense.
Sure. Anyways, we have, leading up to this, Paul Bearer claiming that Undertaker's brother was going to come. Let's take a moment to pause and just laugh at how bad WWE's continuity is here. Undertaker was originally shown the first couple weeks he was ever around. His name wasn't just The Undertaker.
He was Kane the Undertaker.
So apparently Kane the Undertaker's brother is also named Kane.
Yeah, but this is far enough past. I guess you could kind of forgive that, right?
It's been 5-6 years.
Yeah, I wouldn't have remembered that.
Sure. So I'm just going to take this as the Undertaker's parents were so uncreative that our child is Kane 1 and Kane 2, and they're not even twins.
Super lazy.
Yeah, very lazy parenting. This way we'll just know that whenever we yell Kane, we're covered.
One of them's going to come running.
One of them's going to come running. If one of them's acting up, we can just yell at Kane. We're all set.
Yep. So Kane ends up showing up after a pretty decent match.
Right. So I guess we're going to jump all around here, and that's fine.
Yeah, we'll go back to the beginning of the match.
Yeah, we'll jump back to cover the actual match in a few minutes here. Kane ends up showing up as the end, ripping the door off the cage, tombstoning the Undertaker eventually. Shawn is able to crawl over and get the slowest pin known to man, showing just how devastating this guy Kane is, because normally it's tough to keep the Undertaker down.
Right. And then you have Hunter and Chyna come out and drag him to the back.
Yeah, they just come in, swoop up, pick up Shawn, and get him out of Dodge, because who knows what just happened. The lights got cut, went red. This guy came out, fire shooting out of everywhere. Who knows what's going on? We gotta get our guy out of this whole thing.
Right. So it was a big deal to bring in Kane, because as they're standing next to each other, there really wasn't anybody else, I mean, aside from like Sid, who was as big as The Undertaker, because Kevin Nash was off in WCW at this point.
Nash was gone.
So Taker was the resident big man.
Yeah, so...
And you have Kane, who walks in wearing the old school mask.
Right, old school red suit with one sleeve on it, the old school mask and hair.
And the giant black glove on his right hand, stands in front of Taker and is bigger than Taker.
So he's not taller, I don't believe, but he was definitely more massive.
He is taller.
He is taller.
And Kane's legitimately a 7-footer.
Wow.
Taker is 6'10" and a half.
All right. Well, there we go. I have learned something today.
The only reason I know that is because I met Kane, and it was quite the thing to stare up at him. Or I should say, standing next to him, staring him dead in the eye when I'm 15 years old, standing up.
Jeez. I have to imagine I would be really put off by that. I'm 6'3", 6'4" on a good day. I always see tall people and assume they're about my height. When I have to look up to someone, that always kind of puts me off.
Yeah.
Me trying to picture someone a good over a half foot taller than me it's impressive.
Yeah, he's a very large man, and he was all around bigger than Undertaker, which was kind of surprising.
Yeah, he was definitely just a massive guy, which much better gimmick for Glenn Jacobs than the fake Diesel, which we saw last year.
And also Isaac Yankem.
Good old Isaac Yankem DDS.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's a guy that's been saddled with a lot of bad gimmicks, and
it's good that he landed on or they gave him a good one.
Right, which is really amazing, because originally this guy didn't talk.
No, at all.
You had a guy with no mouthpiece whatsoever for a while too, just not talking, wandering around, but they have really made something out of that character.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, aside from The Undertaker, I would put him as one of the better big men that's carried through the Attitude Era.
Right. I mean, in longest running gimmicks, really. Yeah, they've freshened it up a few times here and there, but I mean, it's the same basic character.
You give him a different look every 10, 15 years or so.
Yeah,
and
like 3 to 4 years, they change the look up a bit.
Change the mask, take the mask off, put the mask back on, change the mask again, take the mask off, put him in a suit.
Right. They've really been all over the board with the character, and it's really... People didn't like Corporate Kane. I loved Corporate Kane. I thought it was hilarious.
So did I. It was fun, and he's always managed to make something work.
Right, and especially with the interactions when he was going after Seth, when he was just being super sarcastic about, I wouldn't do anything to my buddy Seth, was hilarious to me. But, all right, that's just me. All right.
So we go
Hell in a
back.
Cell match itself.
Match was really good, except for
Right. Overall, super amazing match. First match of its kind ever like this. I at least have some issues. I think you kind of echo my sentiments on them.
so the first thing I'll bring up is the chair shots.
Yeah.
There was a couple of
Attitude Era chair shots.
straight to the forehead chair shots, and
Totally unprotected chair shots.
I winced every time one happened because it was like, oh no, like what? Why?
Yeah, viewing 1997 chair shots through a 2018 lens, 21 years later, knowing what we know now.
Like I wince when I watch a football player get hit in the head, like concussed wise. So on the flip side of things, when a guy takes a steel folding chair straight to the forehead,
Super uncomfortable.
yeah, it wasn't good.
Yeah, it's no hands up, getting hit on the forearms. It's straight steel to forehead. It's not pleasant in this day and age.
No. And there was a couple of them. Taker took one, and the one that Sean took, I thought when he slumped over and like hit the ground.
Oh yeah,
I thought he was.
took a few too, and
I thought he was legitimately unconscious after one of them.
right, and Taker ain't a small guy by
Right.
any means to be swinging that chair,
Right.
and he's the kind of guy where he's bringing it because that's the era they came from.
Yeah.
Pretty sure Sean too. He's not a small. He's small compared to the Undertaker.
He's small in stature, but he's
He's a
relatively-
strong guy, and
yeah.
he's really not that small. He's small for the era of giants.
right. I mean,
He's not small.
right.
He's not. He's definitely not a cruiser by any means.
No, because I mean, he was still sitting probably around what
240 to 260, I have to guess.
Yeah.
is just a ballpark guess. I'm sure someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
But the other thing that kind of got me was this was the first time this match was ever gonna happen.
First ever Hell in a Cell.
It was meant to keep the two of them in and the degenerates out, and
They had-
keep everybody out of this match so that they could solve what they needed to.
Over the summer, there had been kind of this cool three-way fight over the belt between Undertaker, Brett, and Shawn, and they were all getting each other's business. They couldn't keep their noses out of each other's business. Problems galore. So they figured, that's it. We're settling this in Hell in the Cell.
Which would make sense for the match type. You drop a cage with a roof on it, nobody can get in, nobody can get out, you lock the doors, let these two guys go at it.
Yep. So what happens in the very first Hell in a Cell match?
The door opens because they have to get a stupid camera guy out of there for story purposes who got hurt. The
Yep.
door's wide open, Sean bolts. Taker's right behind him, and now they're beating each other up outside of and up on top.
Right. Of all places to go. Really? So, first off, I didn't even think about this earlier, but now I'm going to make this two actual problems I have with this thing. First off, first ever one, and you've left the damn thing.
Right. That
right off the
cage-
bat.
That cell should have been locked the entire match. Nobody in, nobody out. Have Kane pop up through the floor.
Have Kane come out normally and rip the damn door off and show up strength, that's fine. I have no problem with ripping the door off at the very end, because at that point, no one else got involved in the thing.
That's fair.
No reason for them to go outside of the cage the very first time this thing shows up. Right off the bat, you're saying, all right, this whole thing's a lie. And you're setting these weird expectations on this thing now. And second, going up on top of this thing. Why? You're giving so much potential away. Couple weeks ago, we reviewed Roman Reigns versus Rusev. Kept
Mhm.
entirely inside the ring. Really good match. You do not need to go outside or on top of Hell in a Cell to have a good Hell in a Cell match.
No, not at all.
But the very first one, they're outside, they're on top of it. You're setting the expectations on this thing so ridiculously high, and now you're hamstringing everyone to do one in the future by setting the audience expectations to be they're coming outside of this thing and they're getting on top of it.
Right. If this very first one had nobody go on top of it, the next one that happens, because the next one I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is Taker and Mankind.
I don't believe that. I think that was actually the third one. I don't remember what the second one was. I think it was actually on a Raw.
Okay.
But still.
So even then, you keep them inside for 2 matches, which makes then the already infamous Mick Foley getting tossed off the top even better because it's the first time it's happening.
Right. Sean actually didn't fall off the top of the thing, but he took a bump hanging off the side of the thing through a table,
Right.
which that's a pretty impressive fall.
Yeah, honestly, I was kind of surprised that the prima donna Shawn Michaels at the time was taking those bumps.
So Sean's prima donna stuff during this era was never about in-ring stuff except for the finish.
It
He
was
a-
always the company stuff.
Right. He was always very political about his spot in the company. He was still willing to go out there and take a lot of stuff.
And it still was a little surprising to me that
Fair enough.
even if it wasn't his prima donna, the fact that they would put one of their top guys to do something like that.
Right. So especially I can see it more from your side coming first time seeing this match,
Second time.
second time, but you definitely did not watch it
Live.
back then.
No.
So me being a fan through that era wasn't really so surprising. I can see you knowing more Sean by reputation of the era than
Right. I know the stories of Shawn Michaels through the era, and I know the repented Shawn Michaels after he's
Right.
cleaned himself up.
sure. So
So-
that makes more sense that expecting a certain reputation, seeing someone, that makes sense to me.
Right. So overall, it was a good match.
Yeah, the match itself was really, really good. I think my issue with it comes in retrospect, knowing what I know now. At the time, I definitely was crazy about it. Like, that was the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Right. I mean, anybody, how old were you then?
I would have been 16 when this happened.
Yeah, any 16-year-old seeing a guy with a bloody face and flying off of the side of a cage is going to be like, this is awesome.
Right, and so actually we didn't mention that real quick. The blade job Sean did.
So I don't think I could have been a wrestler around this time period because I don't think I could willingly cut myself open.
Right. Some of the blade jobs during the Attitude Era, this being the start of the Attitude Era, and where it ended up going, they were pretty aggressive. And this one from Sean was a pretty gnarly one.
Well, I mean, you got to figure they got to compete with ECW,
Right. And
and you've seen guys like Devon Dudley with the scars still across his forehead,
Right,
or
just
even
looking like chopped liver. I mean, even Flair has it.
and Dusty Rhodes had it real bad.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I need to see blood in wrestling as much as people think they say they do.
No, it to me it didn't add anything to this. There wasn't really a whole big reason for it. It would have made more sense if Kane was the one that did it,
Right, to Undertaker.
to Undertaker or even to Shawn.
Yeah, he had nothing against Sean at this point, so it didn't really make sense.
That's true.
Um,
But there was no reason for it and it didn't add anything.
yeah, and especially not the level that they were doing it.
No. Like,
Let's go back to last year or earlier this year, last year, when Jericho bloodied Kenny Omega.
that made more sense.
That made more sense, and it had more impact given where and when it was done. Was not done nearly to this level.
No. It reminded me of the infamous Ric Flair with his quote unquote crimson mask.
Right. Flair really bad with it.
Or even the when Cena had it done real bad.
I haven't seen the Eddie Guerrero one that basically caused blood to be stopped in the WWE.
Oh, yeah, that
I
one.
don't think I want to anymore.
It wasn't as bad as this, but it was up there.
So let me say this as far as blood goes. I used to be a big FMW fan.
For those of you that don't know, FMW is essentially ECW on crack in Japan.
FMW is where ECW kind of got their whole shtick from. They had literally the barbed wire exploding ring death matches.
Light tubes and all of that stuff.
Right. They're the big nastiest thing I think I ever saw from them was what's called a spider net, which is literally a mesh, like basically a grid of barbed wire suspended on a board ringside. So it's something that someone could get thrown into and kind of hammocked on.
Yeah,
So you're just suspended by barbed wire a foot off the ground.
I've seen that. It's awful to watch somebody get tossed onto that.
Right. I'm a different person than I was back then, I guess, because there was a time where I was like, okay, this is super awesome. This is so violent, and I don't know what it was about it that appealed to me back then, because it does not appeal to me now.
Because you were 16, 17-year-old boy growing up in the 90s.
Right. And this was probably the early 2000s when I was watching FMW even. I was a little edgelord. I was so...
Right.
Yeah.
It would make sense. I mean, even I, when I hit high school, went back and watched FMW stuff and was watching ECW stuff.
Yeah,
And I was all excited when...
Yeah, it really appeals to a certain demographic of, let's be honest, young, angry male.
And now I could not see... I have a hard time going back and watching the Sandman Sabu barbed wire match.
Yeah, I don't need to see that. I have a level of empathy and compassion now that I apparently lacked back then. I don't need to see another human being go through that level
Right.
of
Especially
suffering for my entertainment.
especially when they're doing it to themselves.
Right.
Like the fact that and Sean's cut wasn't as bad as some of the other ones have been,
Right. It's not the worst one I've ever seen.
but he still had blood from the top of his hairline down to his nose.
Right. And I think there's something to be said for how desensitizing that level of blood can be when Foley, in his Hell in a Cell match, he never bladed,
Right.
which, for those of you that don't know, how you basically come across having the giant bleeding cut in your forehead and your face covered in blood is you take a small little piece of razor blade that you have hidden on your person somewhere and run it across your forehead to give yourself a good bleeding cut that in the long term isn't a very serious injury whatsoever.
Right.
Just, it looks really bad, really isn't.
A lot of times the guys have it hidden in their wrist tape or
Right. You basically just take a piece of razor blade from an X-Acto knife or something and hide it on your person, use it, and then kind of have it discarded.
Right.
Anyways, the level of Foley didn't do that in his Hell in a Cell match with Taker. He ended up bleeding a little bit from his nose from the severe trauma of falling twice that he did.
Right.
And that, I think, was way more impactful.
I think if they had left it at Taker pulling Sean off of the side of the cell and going through that table, cool.
Yeah.
Leave it at that.
Fully agree.
He went through the announcer table. If you wanted to make it even worse, you pick him up and you throw him through the other one.
Yeah.
You don't need the blood that bad.
No, it's clearly at this point, it's fake wrestling blood, even though it's not fake blood, but it's fake bleeding.
Right.
It's not caused by a legitimate injury.
And the worst thing about it too was it in the arena got hardly any reaction from the fans.
Right. And so earlier in this year, they had seen Stone Cold at WrestleMania with a face covered in blood.
Right. At this time, I think it was starting to lose its wow factor like it used to be in the early 90s and the late 80s.
Right. When it was used judiciously, it really meant something. It was starting to become too much.
Right.
And at the time, I would have disagreed with people that said it was too much. I would have been like, no, this is awesome. But when you condition the fans to expect certain things, when it's expected as something, it becomes a sign that nothing before that means anything.
Right.
And you almost kind of zone out and don't really get involved in anything until this signpost happens.
Right. And this is also kind of the reason why so many people gave pushback about WWE going to PG because they had been conditioned so long to no, we want blood, we want chair shots.
Yeah, it's not needed. I think there's other issues with the PG era, but I don't think lack of blood is one of them.
Right. I'd be completely okay if I never saw somebody blade like that again. There are times where blood does show up every now and then.
Right.
Through the nose, through the mouth, something like that. Or when you're wrestling Brock and he...
Let's go back actually to this recent Hell in a Cell, Jeff Hardy versus Randy, when Randy legitimately tore his leg open.
Right.
Now, without even intentionally doing something, I know now that these two guys are up to some super dangerous stuff because one of them actually sliced themselves open.
Right. Or you have somebody like Brock who can make somebody bleed hard way.
Hard way being when usually it's a punch, sometimes an elbow to the kind of eyebrow area. It's an easy place to actually cut someone open. It happens in MMA a lot.
Yeah.
That's where someone will usually typically bleed from just because of how your skull and your skin works. It's an easy break point.
Right. So Brock doing that to Randy a while back ended up adding a little bit more to their feud because the feud kind of started out of nowhere. It didn't make sense. And now these guys are legitimately in a fight with each other.
Right.
Brock cuts Randy hard way, makes him bleed. Everybody's like, oh shit.
Yeah. It definitely means a whole lot more when it's not something happening every week because of
Right.
this really vicious, unprotected chair shot. I don't need to see that kind of stuff every week. I don't want to see that. I know enough about the business now to know how dangerous it is accidentally that I don't need people doing dumb stuff.
Right. Especially when you have somebody like Eddie Guerrero who does it and passes out from blood loss.
Right. Let's go back a couple weeks to our show about SummerSlam 91, Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect. I don't need to see blood in that match to make it look like a legitimate fight between two people.
Right. Those guys looked like they were actually going at it within the realm of disbelief that wrestling has.
Right.
So now it just doesn't have a place as much as it used to.
No, there's a lot of things that these athletic individuals can do that is completely not necessary. That where blood isn't completely necessary. They can do a lot of things that show me that they're trying to hurt each other, that look like they're crazy impact, that looks like it's vicious, that looks like it's ill-intentioned within the confines of this scripted match without actually trying to shorten someone's career or life.
Right.
Like, maybe the world of professional wrestling would be significantly different if we never had unprotected chair shots being a really big thing for 5 years.
Yeah, I could see that. You wouldn't have I don't think you would have had such an emphasis on the concussion stuff before football even got into it.
I mean, getting really deep, what would have maybe happened to Chris Benoit if unprotected chair shots were never a thing?
Or Eddie Guerrero with some of the painkillers and things like that. Or Shawn, for that matter, when he was hopped up on all the different drugs that he was on.
Right. Shawn's career got shortened by an injury, but that injury happened in 1998. He was in a bad place before then.
Right.
How many guys that we've lost could still be with us? How different could the world of wrestling been if unprotected chair shots were never a thing?
Probably drastically.
Right. All right. So on that super happy note, I think that's about all we have to say about Bad Blood.
Yeah, just about.
All right. We will be right back with a little bit of a special look at something here for you, and then we'll go home with this. We'll be right back. All right. So let's not end on quite that much of a down note. So before we go, what we're going to actually do is cover a pretty interesting little tidbit of wrestling history.
Yeah, so in October 1st of 2005,
2005. Okay.
Impact Wrestling debuted on Spike TV. So they had been a pay-per-view only, one show every month for the first 2 years the company was around. So from 2002 to about 2004.
Which was a really odd model for the time, but pretty sure people could get away with that now pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, for a while there was a couple of like pay-per-view only companies where the pay-per-views would just be online that people would pay for.
Right. So this was very early in the internet kind of age, I'll call it. They weren't full price. They weren't $60 a month pay-per-views.
Right, they were like $25, $30.
I thought they were like 15, 20.
Some of them got up there.
Okay. So yeah, Impact had like their weekly pay-per-views, which I think were like 10 to 20.
Yep.
Then they had like their big
Monthly
events
ones.
like Bound for Glory. Bound for Glory. I'm sure they have other big ones, but all I can think of is Bound for Glory.
Right. So in about June of 2004, they were on Fox Sports Net,
All right.
which, yay, really cool. But
Technically, it's a network.
they got a really, really crappy time slot. They were like 4 p.m. on Fridays.
Wow, that's just awful.
Right. Like
4 p.m.
you're in the middle of the work commute. Like nobody's going to be watching this.
Right, yeah. I'll
And-
have to set my VCR, or probably DVR may have existed. Maybe?
You'd at,
Maybe TiVo was a thing?
you'd at best be getting the kids who were home from school and managed to steal mom and dad's credit cards.
Right. Wow. Well, no, because this was on Fox Sport Net now.
No, that's true.
So they didn't
That's
have to
true.
steal a
So
credit card. Just let me find the obscure channel in the 50s or 60s and pop this thing on.
Right.
Yeah.
So after that, they ended up moving to Spike TV.
So this must have been shortly after they lost their WWE Raw programming back to USA Network.
Correct.
So for a while,
So the only
Raw had switched off of USA Network, went over to, at the time, the Nashville Network, TNN.
Yep.
TNN would eventually rebrand as Spike. Then they would lose Raw back over to USA Networks.
The only thing that Spike had at the time was Velocity,
Woo.
Right.
Velocity.
which surprisingly enough, the last time it aired on Spike was Impact's first episode.
Oh, they must have done that intentionally where they were trying to put it up as a lead-in to it.
Mm-hmm. And
Trixie.
the way that it ended up working was Velocity went first.
Right.
And-
To try to get that established WWE market.
Right. And then Impact would go on not as great as a 4 p.m. on Fridays. They went on at 11 p.m. on Saturdays.
Man, that is a rough slot.
Yeah.
I can think of exactly one show people are watching at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night. Being Saturday Night Live on NBC.
Well, this is starting at 11.
Right.
So SNL's usually wrapping up around then. The only thing I
No,
could
SNL starts at like 11:30.
Oh, okay.
So,
I was going to say the only thing I could think of was Cops, but
which crossover between the Cops audience and the Impact audience probably pretty good.
probably there. So they ended up going to Spike, and it was the first time two different wrestling promotions were on the same network.
Right, for 12 seconds approximately.
Right. So the card was actually pretty decent if you look at a couple matches. TNA debut of the Dudley Boys.
So, definitely not nothing there.
Kevin Nash came back to Impact.
Yeah, I suppose that's technically not nothing.
AJ Styles went over Roderick Strong.
So, current... Wait, is...
Strong's NXT tag
Okay.
champ.
Right, I was getting confused with Nigel McGuinness. So, Roddy, currently part of Undisputed Era.
Yep.
And AJ, has he been up to anything lately?
Still WWE champ.
No, fair enough. I guess that's something.
Then you had Monty Brown going over Lex Lovett. Monty Brown had that short stint in
ECW, CW.
yeah.
Or, sorry, WWECW.
He was a pretty big deal when Jeff Jarrett was kind of the top dog in
Yeah, this
Impact.
guy was really supposed to be a thing. But
he was good.
he was all right.
I mean, he was a big guy that moved pretty quick.
He did the pounce.
Don't get me started on that.
Okay.
Next match was Chris Sabin going over Alex Shelley and Petey Williams.
Definitely nothing there.
Could have been a really good match.
Yeah, probably was a really good. So again, classic X Division type stuff.
Yeah. And then Jeff Hardy and Rhino went to a no contest, which is kind of interesting because this is right after Hardy disappeared from WWE the first time.
Right. So this would be before he really became a mess.
Yeah.
He would eventually get back to WWE, be SmackDown, have a good program with Punk, leave, go back.
Well, he also had a really good program with Edge with the WWE title picture.
Right.
Went back to Impact and had that infamous match where Bischoff
infamous
comes
match
out.
with Sting, yep.
Bischoff comes out, tells Sting to just put him down and hold him down.
Just whatever you need to do, end this farce.
Yep. So overall, a pretty decent little thing to happen.
Not a bad little debut of things there.
Coming from, or starting off there, going to where Impact is now. Where
Right. It's really funny to think that, oh, right, this company's still around, still doing their thing.
I mean, they're not like a super ratings powerhouse like WCW was in
Right,
the
and they're not
competition.
even really on a real network, I'm going to say.
No, they're on one of those ones that you have to call your cable company to make sure that you get.
Yeah. And so actually, the show was called Impact. The brand is actually called Impact now.
Correct. Before it was
So-
called TNA,
It was
Total Nonstop Action.
Was this NWA TNA?
It was not.
Okay.
No, it was.
I think it was,
It
yeah.
was.
So still carrying the NWA banner.
Yep.
It was-
Because it was
NWA TNA Impact was the name of the show, like Raw is the name of WWE's Monday Night Show.
Yeah, because they lost the NWA banner right around 2006.
Sure.
So now that they've gotten rid of the TNA, which Total Nonstop Action, now the brand is just called Impact.
Right. So now it's just Impact Wrestling.
Which
from everything, we really need to check that out one of these days.
I've watched a couple of their things on YouTube.
Uh-huh.
Their matches are pretty solid. I mean, when you have Austin Aries as your main champ going up against Johnny Impact, aka
Johnny
John
Mundo, a.k.a. Johnny
John Mo-
Nitro,
right.
a.k.a.
John Morrison,
Right.
it's bound to be something decent. Or when you have Pentagon Jr. and Phoenix teaming up in a tag team, you can't go wrong
I mean,
with some
they
of this
had
stuff.
Pentagon Jr. take the belt off Aries for a hot minute there.
Yeah.
It was only a few days, but we should track that down. Maybe we'll do that for an episode. Well, I don't want to do it next year, but we should look for something from them that's more recent.
Yeah, they've definitely come a long way from where they were.
Right. But I'd say, let's be honest. We're going to have some weeks coming up here where there's not really any good shows to cover. Maybe we'll do a special episode of the history of TNA and let's look where they're at now because we need to get to them and we don't want to wait a year to see where they've
We've
done.
aside from this covered them once.
Right.
Maybe
we had
twice.
that. I'll give it a half because I think it was when we were still doing the not focusing on one shows.
Right.
All right. Well, that feels like a pretty complete show to me now.
Yeah. Now, coming up in a couple of weeks, we are going to have our first guest on.
Yeah, we're actually going to get a third person on here for an episode. It's not going to be a full-time thing, but you can do a little special Halloween episode.
Yeah, and some of you don't get your hopes up. It's not like we're grabbing any.
It's a
like,
friend
names.
of ours. Yeah, it's no one famous or anything yet.
We don't know that just yet.
So we'll have a special guest coming up here in a couple weeks. In the meantime, I don't know if we've even quite planned out what's next week, but we got some plans in motion here.
Nah, we fly by the seat of our pants here.
That's what we do. So, plug time?
Yeah. So Facebook, This Week in Wrestling History. Twitter, it's WrestleHistPod.
Yup.
You can find us on Spotify, Google Play Music, iTunes,
Yes.
pretty much anywhere that you can get a podcast.
I'm about to say we're about to actually hit our first 1,000 downloads, which is pretty awesome in my mind.
We're 907. Please get us to 1,000.
Yeah, maybe we'll do something cool when we hit 1,000. So share what you got. Be great. Share us if you like us. Also, if you like us, leave a review on iTunes or something that actually really helps the show get noticed.
Yeah, same thing with I believe you can review on Google Play also.
Yeah, so if you like us, leave a review. If you don't like us, send us an email and we'll talk to us about it. No, maybe
You-
don't leave a review yet.
Don't leave a review if you don't like us. Don't do that.
Yeah, please. We're begging.
Well, I mean, if you don't like us, you're also probably not listening. So
Yeah, good point. All right, that's enough of us for this week. Anything else?
I'm out.
We're history.
Hey guys, this is Jamie,
And this is Steve-O.
and we are the hosts of Missing the Mark Wrestling Podcast.
Hashtag your new favorite wrestling podcast.
We are a wrestling podcast for wrestling fans by wrestling fans.
And you can find us anywhere you can find your podcast, so check us on out.
Every 2 weeks, you're going to get a brand new episode from us, anywhere from WWE pay-per-view coverage, what's going on in the state of professional wrestling, as well as interviews with superstars such as former WWE superstar Colin Delaney.
And the review shows can get a little bit heated sometimes, but it's all in good fun. And we want you to join in on the fun.
So please subscribe, listen, download. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at @missingthemark_, as well as on Facebook, Missing the Mark Wrestling Podcast. And I don't think you'll regret it.
The most must-listen-to wrestling podcast out there.
All right. Thank you guys for checking us out, and we'll see you down the road.